Good afternoon. Delighted that you've joined me this beautiful Friday afternoon as we head towards the end of July. Can't believe it. The schools are broken up. That means we're going to have Jaden for 3 months. Ah, bless him. I look forward to when we have my grandchildren coming over from Bulgaria and grandchildren coming from everywhere. And you know, so I love my grandchildren. I love spending time with them. I'm so proud of them all. Anyway, let me get on with this because I've noticed if I do too much, it bores you, and not do too much, I can't get it downloaded onto my wherever it's got to go because there's too much space being used up to it. Today I'm going to cover something that I've been putting off for a while and decided I'll do it anyway. And it's about a book, I think I've mentioned this a number of times, called On Our Knees by Rosanna Sweetman, Ireland 1972. Have you ever been ashamed of yourself? Well, I have a few times, a good few times, and rightly so. But never so much as when I read this chapter. Each chapter in this book, by the way, is about famous people in Ireland. Don't know why I'm in it. Anyway, people like Charles Haughey. Charles Haughey was the minister at the time, a Dublin politician and businessman at the time. He went on to become Taoiseach of Ireland, which is our Prime Minister, and he surrounded in controversy. But Charlie was a real character. When he died, the state funeral was held, no one went. Such a great shame that was. Anyway, the other names in the book, each gets their own chapter, as Cathal Goulding, Chief of Staff of the official IRA. Oh my God, some company I'm keeping. And Sean McStiffoyne, who was provisional IRA leader, and the Honourable Desmond Guinness, who was to inherit the Guinness fortune, I suppose. Anyway, Rosanna Sweetman begins her account of talks she had with hand-picked cross-section of Irish people, some from the north, some from the south. Rosanna Sweetman is a highly respected authoress. She's worked with the BBC, with Irish television, with well-known newspapers, Amnesty International, and she is one of the founders of the Irish Women's Liberation Association. So that's the sort of woman she was. She took, I think, an instant dislike to this long-haired geek that she went to interview. Anyway, so I this is the truth. And I want to share this with you. I've never read the book. And in my own chapter, I reread a few bits where it said Morris Boland. It's awful. But I sat down the other night and I read it, my chapter that is, and I swear to you, I was totally ashamed of myself. It starts off here, it says, as a 15-year-old, Morris Boland was engaged to a girl in Germany. Well, that's not true. Maybe I spoofed. Because I was there in Germany with the King Bees drumming, and maybe I just told her a little white lie, who knows. I swung around in a chauffeur-driven car, it says, abandoning school on the grounds that it didn't bring the popularity or the fame he so desperately sought. That's probably true. I think, I left school, I don't know how, but both parents are doctors, most of the family, then my uncles and aunts and what have you, dentists and doctors, and here's me leaving school at 15 to become the next Ringo Starr. I didn't make it. Anyway, so my chauffeur-driven cars, I don't know what they're talking about there, and it said my ambition was to be a British television celebrity, preferably David Frost. So isn't that funny? What is that, 50 or what a year, 1972? But I was younger when I actually did the interview, I think. But then I wanted to be a radio or television star. And they talk about Elizabeth there, and where I was born, that my grandfather was, was from Russia originally, Latvia, Riga was part of Russia then. It says here, after a couple of years, he abandoned the group, that's the King Bees. I can't bear the thought of being with something or someone that's not at the peak, meaning they're not famous enough. A year was spent at home with me mammy and daddy. I had the appearance of wealth. Every penny I ever made, well, let me put it another way. I had the appearance of wealth because I was a cheeky little monkey and I would go to the finest stores in Dublin and sign out to Dr. Boland, because I don't know nowadays, but most of these stores had accounts, and my mother had an account in one of the finest stores in Dublin called Brown Thomas. So I just go in there, buy stuff, and then my father said, "Why? You should be earning now." I actually got married, and I remember the first week, the milkman came to my door and asked for the money for the milk. You remember they had a little leather pouch and what have you. And I said, yeah, go to Dr. Bowen, they'll pay it. Everyone was, Mr. Bowen was advised, yeah, it says I was advised by everyone not to open the discotheque. The more people advised me not to do it, I went ahead and did it anyway. Here's a horrible thing here. If you ask Mr. Bowen, does he feel guilty about having so much money when there are so many poor people around? He said, not at all, why should I? If you ask him, would he allow working class people into his club? He says, well, it depends firstly on the way they look, on the way they dress. Well, that's true, actually. I had a certain, rule that you had to wear a shirt and tie to come into the club, and a certain look. I got that by watching a program on the founder, I can't remember his name, what was it, Club 5041, whatever, New York. And he was stopping everyone he didn't like the look of. It wasn't me that was stopping, by the way. It was the doorman in my club. I also, the way they spoke. So if they came to the club, how are you, Mr. Bowen? How are you doing there? How are you all right now? There'd be no chance in a million years they'd come in. But yet they could walk up the stairs, because my club is a basement club, they could walk up the stairs and get into a Ferrari and drive to their private jet. And I judged everything on looks and voice and what have you. It's terrible, terrible. He believes that it is... do I have any guilt about having so much money? He says he believes he's taking money from the rich in order to cater for the rich. If working class people came into my club, they would be embarrassed by the prices. And here in the book, I forgot this, that a meal in Elizabeth's, and which Elizabeth was one of the most expensive places, one of them in Dublin at the time, was £4 a head for dinner. £4. Saving is an axiom, Maurice Bowen's success. When he offers to buy you lunch in the Hibernian Hotel is like the Savoy in London. We used to all go there, a gang of us, every afternoon, and we'd have tea, which was in a pot, None of us really drank tea and with leaves, the real thing, and chicken sandwiches, lovely, and everything was on china. It was all served on Chinese, not in China, dear, on china. No crusts on the chicken. Oh, God, I think about it now and my mouth is watering. And it says... when he says here, when he invites you for the lunch, it means tea and chicken sandwiches in the lounge. When he entertains business guests, it's either in his own club or at home with his wife. Maurice has his problems. A few weeks ago, this is about going to a funeral. It's quite sad, so I'll leave that out. A typical day in the life of Maurice Bowen begins around 1 p.m. He gets up that day. I met him. He was rather red-faced, you see, having fallen asleep under a sunray lamp. I remember reading a book by Onassis, and it says, to look rich and successful, always remember to be tanned in the winter. So this must have been written around December, and there I was, red-faced from the sun. Lamp, it was. His first business meeting, she had to accompany me everywhere. He tries it 4 hours a day for his wife. They married about 9 months ago. He is not sure why. This is just nonsense. This is me like, hey, well, I didn't need... I'm not sure why. I adored her, that's why. If he doesn't have a regular business meeting, then maybe an hour-long trip to the hairdressers. She had to accompany me to the hairdressers while the interview was going on. Anyway, it went on like that. It says at home is his wife, and she was a very beautiful ex-model. And this is unbelievable, this bit. The model part being terminated by Maurice himself. I couldn't bear to see her, the picture in the papers, and not mine. You have no idea how opposite it really was. Mind you, once Wendy's listening to this, she might agree with it. I am the boss in our house. She has no part whatsoever in my business. I can't bear to have her around when I'm working. That's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? I remember New Year's Eve. It was a big night in Club Elizabeth, and people would be booking tables months in advance. And Wendy would always say, I want a table for 4 or 6, and her model friends, And Elizabeth's, the average age, I think, was probably 30 upwards, 25, 30 upwards. It wasn't teenagers. But Wendy and her friend, but always like 6 o'clock that evening, I'd phone Wendy. I said, sorry, Wendy, I gave your table away. And I feel so guilty about these things. I'm reading this book. In some ways, it sometimes started a rival, but yeah, it talks about closing a business down. There's an example of that, not in the book, but I'm not going to talk about it now. Where is he most frightened of losing my money. It goes on about money. If there's a bad night in the restaurant, I don't get over it for 4 days. If I failed, I don't think I'd ever get over it for 4 years. I have a very quick temper. Well, that's not true. I talk a lot about what I'm going to do. You know, if some people went bankrupt, people would say, poor guy. If I went bankrupt, they'd say, I told you so. See, I always left myself up, as some of the people remember not that long ago, to be shot down. Now, the bank strike, it wrote here, it says, after the bank strike, I nearly committed suicide. I took a lot of pills then. Now, there wasn't sort of drugs that I know of. But as I said, my father was a doctor, and he used to get samples sent to the house, different pills. And I'd read about Brian Jones, and I read about these pills called Mandrex, Mandes for short. And I remember going to finding a bottle of them, whatever, and taking one. Jesus, for sleeping, it meant to be a sleeping pill. Oh my God. I took one when I got home from the club. Oh my God, it was fantastic, this Mandrex. It curled my toes, it gave me a buzz. See, it's barbiturate. I didn't know anything like that. I took one. Oh, I had the best night's sleep ever. And I started taking them. And I remember Wendy had some friends at the house, and she knew when I was going to take my Mandrex. So I'd go into the kitchen, I'd take it with hot water, it gets it to work quicker. And you'd sit down at the table with Wendy and her friends, and I'd start speaking like this. And Wendy said, just go to bed, will you? So I got very hooked on Mandrex. And eventually I had to go to my father and admit it. And my father said, right, we can't take you off them straight away. We've got to take you different pills to bring you down slowly. And which he did. I remember Dolmain was another pill we had to take to get down. And eventually I got off them. But I lost everything during the bank strike in Dublin. I had a very wealthy member of my club who spent lots of money. I mean, big money with me all the time, always paid his bills. And one day during the bank strike, of course, I was obtaining a lot of cash. No one really paid by credit cards in those days, no one. I obtained a lot of cash, and he came to me one day and said, can I have your cash? Because I need to pay my builders. I can't pay them with credit cards. And I wanted to get rid of the cash. I was quite frightened. I was taking this much cash. So I said, absolutely. So he gave me a check for the cash, and everything went well. And after the bank strike, and it lasted a couple of months, Mr. Murray, my bank manager in Baggot Street, Ulster Bank, his secretary called me and said, Mr. Murray, I'd like to see you. And I actually thought he wanted a celebration about the amount of money. And during the bank strike, I paid $2,500 for a brand new TR6 convertible fuel injection, the first one in Dublin. Cash I paid, $2,500. That's a huge amount of money when you think it was £4 for an expensive meal. Anyway, I went to see Mr. Murray, and he looked at me and I said, well, he said, all the checks bounced. So I had to sell a part of the club. Anyway, it says here, my favourite possession is a mirror. And I'd like to be big in television. And it went on here. What does he plan to do next? At the moment, I want to have my own talk show on TV. I'd like to start here, get really good, and then go to London. I've seen the videotape of myself being interviewed on television, and it really was good. If you don't mind me saying so, give myself a compliment. Anyway, this is the end of the story here. I invited Rosanna Sweetman to come to Elizabeth's, which, you know, as I told her, it was expensive for drink there and everything. So I told her, please come. And she said, do you mind if I bring some friends? And I said, of course you can bring friends. So listen, here's the laugh. At 11:30 that night, with 2 friends, I set off. This is Rosanna reporting. I set off for Elizabeth's. We were in jeans, not exactly scruffy, but not wearing the tiaras and diamonds either. The doorman glazed us up and down with that professional square. Sorry, we're full, he said. We explained that I had been expressly invited by Mr. Boland himself. Come back in half an hour. And he closed the door. We stood on the pavement bemoaning our tragic loss. Then someone went down the stairs and was admitted. Then another couple, a man, tall, with sleek black hair, an overcoat, 30s businessman, I'd say. The lady hair somewhat less sleek due to the liberal amount of peroxide being applied. They went, and they were let in immediately. Me, this is her, back down the door. Why did you say you were full and then allow these other people in? Doorman, we're full. Me, you're obviously not. Is it perhaps you don't want our type of person in your club? Doorman, that's irrelevant. Me, it is not at all irrelevant. If you said you didn't want our type in your club, we would have understood. But if you say you are full, though, and then let others in, it's more difficult to understand. The doorman flexes muscles, closes the door into the restaurant. So it's like the foyer area they're standing now in. He and I are isolated, eyeball to eyeball in confrontation. Gathering up the last shreds of proud indication, I said, "Good night," a watchful eye on those wrists myself. And if you think I'll ever come back, you're mistaken, mister. Taking my type and the types away from Mr. Boland's club, I hear the doorman bawling up the steps, "Good!" And that was the end of the chapter. I don't think she liked me very much. And even worse, I was standing behind the door watching all of this because I wanted more space in her book. And I thought she'd write it, and she did. Let me lean forward and say, have a great Friday evening.